Welcome on into onesoccer.ca, everybody. You're watching One Soccer today. Andy, Ollie, Gareth with you. Special guest from The Athletic, but we've had him on before. He is friend of the show. That is Joshua Cloak. Welcome on into this edition, my friend. We're going to get to something special that you have written and you have launched. But before we get to that, we want to pick your brain on the latest window for Canada, taking on Qatar, followed by Uruguay. Qatar, that was a nice 2-0 victory for the Canadians, dominating possession. Really restricting Qatar to just a couple shots on net. So very promising performance by them. Then the game we were all waiting for, 13th ranked Uruguay, the pace, another level. Uruguay getting both their goals in that first half before Canada really started to take it to them in the second half. Just couldn't find the back of the net. Cloak, you're the guest. I'm going to start with you. Which match would you say you learned the most from, right? Would you say you learned more from the Canadian squad when it comes to that Qatar game or Uruguay game?
I don't think there's any question it's the Uruguay game. I was texting people in and around the Canadian camp after the Qatar game, and there was kind of a resounding feeling of we didn't learn anything because Qatar really didn't, press them off the ball and just allowed Canada far too much time and space. And that's not the way things are going to look for this team in the World Cup. But against Uruguay, I think what I learned was, and I think what a lot of players on the Canadian side learned is just how little time great opposition sides need to punish you, right? I think Alistair Johnson is probably going to be replaying that goal that Darwin Nunez scored, jumping up over him again and again. And that's a good thing, right? Because you have to have these learnings, these lessons going into the World Cup. So, because that's what I saw from Uruguay, a side that gave Canada a lot of respect, deserved respect. But again, they really didn't need a lot to punish Canada, whereas Canada had far more opportunities, but they couldn't convert. And I think that's something a lot of players are probably going to take away going into Qatar.
Gareth?
Yeah, the Uruguay game. I mean, they came in so ramped up because they haven't played an opponent like that. And now that you have that experience pushed off to the side, now you can kick on and actually kind of know what it feels like to play against one of those better sides. And you can do that with confidence as well, knowing that you can go toe to toe. This isn't a Canada team that's going to sit there and park the bus like previous versions of this country did. Like many other small nations do when they play the bigger sides. Look at Iran when they played against Uruguay. And Iran's been a team that's been at recent World Cups and been relatively competitive, but it's just through kind of sticking and staying true to your defensive shape and trying to hold on. Now, will it ultimately bring Canada success come the World Cup? We'll see. Are they going to be a pain in the play against? Absolutely, because they're willing to come out and play you straight up and press you and put you into uncomfortable areas. So I think we learned a lot about Canada and what they are made of and what their approach will be come 2 months from now.
Yeah, Uruguay by a mile. It reminded me a little bit in some ways of the USA game at the Gold Cup last year, in the sense that it felt like one where Canada lost the game but showed something that we can take a lot of positives out of going into these next few weeks and months. I remember being at that Gold Cup game against the US. They conceded in the first minute. And up until that point, Canada had done well, obviously, to reach the octagonal. They'd won their first 2 Gold Cup games, but there were still elements to their performance that weren't quite there, weren't quite clicking. And you just wondered, being in the States against the States, 1-0 down after 1 minute, how they were going to respond and what that game might look like by full time. And they ended up being the better team for the remainder of the game. So I think it's kind of a similar... I see them at a similar stage in some ways now, where they've gone into a game like that against Uruguay. It hasn't started well. They've stayed with it, played well, arguably been the better team from that point onwards. And that's given them, I think, a basis of performance that they can now take into Qatar. What my kind of minor, or not minor, but my kind of concern is going into these matches against Belgium and Croatia is you look back at what happened after that US Gold Cup game. They went into the octagonal. Obviously, they finished the Gold Cup first very well. They went into the octagonal, and you could see, like I said, that basis of performance that they needed was there, but they only won 1 of their first 5 octagonal games, right? Now, partially that was the schedule going away to USA and Mexico and so on, but there was still kind of this period of time that they needed to take it from having the performances to being ruthless and clinical enough to get the results. And that's where I wondered, are Canada going to have enough time to kind of make that next step, given they've only got 1 game before they play against Belgium at the World Cup in that friendly against Japan. So they've got to now say that they're there in terms of being able to be on that pitch and belong, but can they turn quality performances and good things into clinical moments and results that they're going to need to get out of that group?
Ollie, what you said there, sorry, just to jump in super quickly, Ollie, what you said there that makes a lot of sense to me is they're there, right? Because throughout qualifying, it felt like this team was really tactically fluid and they would try different looks. But it felt like, to me, Uruguay was kind of the culmination of all that, because when you talk to players and you talk to John Herdman, after qualifying, they kind of debriefed and players almost said resoundingly, we want to go after games. We believe we have the talent. We believe we have the pace, and we believe we can put in the effort and that we can go after games, maybe in a way that sometimes they didn't through qualification. So I think that's what I certainly took away from the Uruguay game, is this is the style of play that players want to play. And you can see everybody kind of on the same page in that regard. So I think there's some confidence you can take from that game, because when you try to go after when you try to go after a game, you might not get the result right away, but at least you're certainly trending in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. So let's go to feelings and how we're feeling after that window. And Gareth, encouraged, discouraged after the September window?
Yeah, very encouraged. It just depends what your expectations are at. Like, this group that they're in is incredibly difficult. Morocco has Mazraoui and Ziyech back and just beat Chile 2-0. Like, they're a really, really good team. And that's the team that probably the fewer number of Canadians are actually talking about. And that's the game that many Canadians think that Canada can go on and win. That's going to be a real challenge. Just watching Croatia in this window, they're in unbelievable form right now. Like, heading into Euro and through playing Euro, I believe that they had lost 9 of 16 games. Now they've lost like twice since that time in like 17 games. They're like on an unreal run of form right now. Belgium's Belgium. Like, Kevin De Bruyne, arguably a top 3, maybe even a top 2 player in the world today. So based on my expectations, I just want this Canadian team to play well, to put on a show, to continue to build what they've established here. John Herdman said it so many times, and I hope that Canada's listening. Like, Canada cannot bridge that gap between them and the biggest nations in this world in like 6 months. It's going to take years in order to see through this process. But from where they were 2 years ago to where they are today, and how they are absolutely punching above their weight, both in terms of style of play, getting results, all the measurables. They had a better XG in that game against Uruguay than Uruguay did. Like, this Canada team, it's remarkable how they're playing. Just in every single facet. I'm so impressed with what Herdman's done with this group and what these players are showing. And you guys did the interview with Kamal Miller after the game. He was pissed that they lost. And I'm like, this is wild. Kamal Miller is actually fuming that they lost that game to Uruguay where no one really gave them a chance. So look, it's going to take some serious happenings over the next 2 months for, winning a game, moving on from the group. But the way that they're playing, I have a better feeling now that they're going to be that much more difficult to play against, and they have the potential to do something than I did entering this window, just based on how they played. Look, Noah Tiba, Tejan Azami, they didn't skip a beat. Like, I don't know. I thought they were really, really good, and they have a lot to be proud of.
Mm-hmm. Ollie?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm hugely encouraged, and I think anyone by any reasonable measure has to be encouraged and has to be impressed with the progress this team has made over the past couple of years. It's been pretty extraordinary, I think. I talk about making that next step from being, having the performances to getting the results and being ruthless, because I think that's what they're looking at, right? They want to get out of this group at the World Cup, and that's what they kind of define as something that will really make noise and make the world stand up and pay attention and change the game in this country for a long, long time. That's their target. I think from the outside looking in, Wheels is totally right. I think, just going there, not doing themselves, doing themselves justice, not disgracing themselves, playing their football, trying to impose themselves on games. I think most people, if they see that against opponents of this quality, they're going to be pretty satisfied by Canada's performance. But internally in that group, you saw it when Herdman came off the pitch. He was obviously happy with aspects of the performance, but what he told the team was that if you want to get results against teams like this and at that World Cup, you've got to be able to make more of performances like that, right? There was a bit of criticism in there. So that, I think, is their goals internally. But I think if you're not looking at where this Canada team has come from to the ability they have to play Uruguay like they did this week, and you're not happy with that and not encouraged by that, then you're living on another planet.
Ollie, when I heard John say that to you, I kind of smirked, because I think this is Herdman being Herdman. I think he's pushing the right buttons when to kind of build up that whole idea of we need to be underdogs. And then at times, like when they play remarkably well in a game like that, he tries to take it a step back to try to, well, we could have done better. You know what I mean? Like it's the genius behind his coaching, his man management, is that he knows when to push those buttons. Are you kidding me? Uruguay had 3 chances and they scored on 2 of them. Like that was it. That was it. That was the game. One was from a set piece. The other, like 15 seconds after a throw in. So, I mean, I kind of smirked just because I know exactly what he's doing here, and he's playing to the right audience. Absolutely.
But it's not the first time he's done it, right? He did it at Azteca as well when they drew that game, said they should have won. And but that pushes the team, I think.
Yes, yeah, players watch all of that. Players watch all of that. Players feed off that, right? Players want to see the clip right after the game. How is Herdman assessing our performance? What does he want us to know? And yeah, listen, I know it makes for bad TV, but I completely agree with both of you guys that you have to be wildly encouraged by this. You have to be encouraged by the fact that Canada was able to drop players into roles, players that hadn't played it a lot through qualifying, and they could do a job. To me, that speaks to Herdman's tactical planning and how seamless he makes it for players. I look at Sam Piette, a player that, you know, has kind of been an afterthought throughout qualifying, kind of a role player. Started 2 games, bench player. And I thought he did really, really well. I mean, is he going to usurp Atiba Hutchinson come World Cup time? We'll see what Atiba Hutchinson's health is like. But I do think if you're looking for more and more reasons to be encouraged, it's that you can turn a player who was, again, once thought of as a player that could only do one specific thing, and that's break up, you know, opposition plays, and have him come in. I thought Sam Piette was great at moving the ball from side to side, switching play, especially against Qatar. And again, that speaks to just how well prepared this team is. And to me, that's another reason to be encouraged.
Both games, we also saw Ismael Kone subbed in. Do you think, Ollie, he's played his way onto a World Cup roster?
Yeah, he's going to be on the plane. And I think, like I said after the game, the more pertinent question at this point is not, is he going to be on the roster? It's how much time is he going to get on the field? Because I think John Herdman is increasingly looking at him as someone who is ready for that. I don't know if he, you know, you could consider him for a starting role if Atiba Hutchinson is not there. I don't know if we're there yet. But certainly off the bench, he's someone who can influence the game and make an impact. And you know, it's interesting to think about, like, hopefully they need Atiba Hutchinson. I think that was one of the takeaways from this camp. He is missed when he's not there in a big way still, even at this point in his career. But if he's not, it does give John Herdman, I think, an interesting dilemma of, like, I look at it and think Piette is the safer option to get you through 60 minutes to be competitive, and then you can bring someone like Kone on. But again, if your objective is to get out of that group and not just to be kind of, you know, to you know, not disgrace yourself, do you have to roll the dice and potentially put Kone in there from the start? Maybe in if not in all games, at least at some point. Like it could mean that there's more risk of you getting beaten 5-0, but it could also give you a better chance of winning the game against one of those big teams. And you're going to need to do that at some point if you're going to qualify from this group. So I think he's an enormous talent. He's going to play a part in Qatar. He will certainly be on the roster. And it's just the extent of that part he plays that I think is going to be a really interesting decision for Herdman to make.
Yeah, I too love Ismael Kone, and I love what he brings. And I think what's really interesting and what I saw from him in this window and what I've seen from him this season in Montreal, he's a young player, 20 years old, and he relies so much more on instinct than some of his peers on the national team. And I think that's really important to bring him on late. He's a really difficult player if you're Belgium, if you're Croatia, to game plan against, because A, they haven't seen a lot of him, and B, like I said, he plays so much on instinct. He can, you know, make really quick decisions. He's so silky on the ball. So to me, he's the kind of player that you're definitely going to want to bring in late in the game when you need a spark. I like Ollie. I don't know if I see him as a starter yet, probably because defensively there's still some work to do there. But I just love the idea of him bringing him in. He can change the dynamic of a game completely. So yeah, I don't think there's any doubt he's on the plane now.
Just really quickly, I think he was on the plane after the March window. I don't think it's been in
Quite
doubt
possibly.
for months. He impressed everyone at camp, and he was playing. He played twice in that March window over other more established players in the team. So I think he's been there. Another Canadian success story from completely off the radar. I will repeat this. John Herdman discovered Ismael Kone watching One Soccer, the Champions League, him play. That's what he saw Kone play for the first time. That's how he was discovered. So there you go. Him and Alistair Johnston playing League One Ontario, just like these are gifts from the soccer gods to Canada and John Herdman. And he's going to use them. He's going to use them both a lot.
It's interesting, right? That like as much as we are now starting to see, the MLS clubs all have their academies and have had them for some time, and we're starting to see the productivity that can come out of that. A lot of the best Canadian players still come from absolutely nowhere, still come from left field, and it kind of emphasizes the need while we continue to build out the CPL and youth development in this country. You have to cast the net wide and keep your eyes open, or you're going to miss players who can have a big impact on your national team.
And that's the story I hope we tell in the lead up to the World Cup, right? I do think it's important to kind of connect with younger players around the country and say, if Ismael Kone can do it, right, how many more Ismael Kones are out there? And, I think we've long had a problem with kind of retention rates with the sport in this country. And I think getting Ismael Kone minutes and getting him out there and putting his face out there, getting his story out there. I was able to talk to him a few weeks ago in Montreal, just an incredible story of him. And, it's just him and his mom there in Montreal. And I think we need to tell more of those stories, and we need to make sure that players around Canada understand that there's people like you on this national team, and there could be a pipeline for you in the future.
We can tell as many stories as we want, Josh, but the one thing that hasn't changed is the political side and infighting and animosity just spoiling Canadian soccer in a lot of ways. This isn't a new story. This has happened for decades now, and it continues to happen. The squabbling, the fighting, the negativity. It's just, so when stories like this happen, this and a player's successful, it goes against the grain.
Yeah, talent wins.
Who else's stock would you say rose in your eyes? I'll start with you, Gareth.
I think they're, aside from the central midfield area, which Ollie and Josh covered, I think there's a real competition as to who's going to start at right fullback or right wing back. I don't think that's Richie Larea's position anymore. That's just my gut feel. Just listen to John Herdman. He wants players that are playing at the highest level possible all the way up until the World Cup. TFC not making the playoffs is no bueno. And hearing Herdman say that Richie had other opportunities in the league championship and didn't take them because he chose to come back home, that might have been a miscalculation by Larea. I think that's opened the door for Junior Hoylett. I thought Hoylett was great in that window and proved that he can play that position for the national team. He's been playing it for Reading, who's third place in the league championship right now. I think he's a player that when we talk about this team, we don't talk about him enough. He's going to have a substantial role, whether it's that right wing back position, whether it's across in the front three. He brings experience. He brings quality. I think it was a message delivered why he wore the captain's armband over Steven Vittori and Milan Borjan, who both wore the captain's armband during World Cup qualifying. Herdman's delivering a message there, in my opinion. Buchanan can obviously play there, but I think Buchanan might be preferred maybe in a front three. We saw him come on and play on the left. Buchanan's certainly going to play, but I think it's an open competition between Hoylett, Buchanan, Larea for that right wing back position. So, and Junior caught my eye, and everything that John did, we should be paying attention to that.
Ollie?
Yeah, I think Hoylett is definitely one. From what I was told, he's physically in a lot better shape than maybe he has been in the past. His distance ran per game has gone up quite dramatically, I think, and partially obviously as a product of playing the wing back position too. Now. Yeah. So he's one who's definitely his stock has gone up. I thought apart from him, there wasn't that many changes really, a positive or negative in the group. I think the group is pretty settled at this point going into Qatar. But one I picked out was Sam Adekubi, just because I think that left wing back spot, maybe unlike Larea on the right, is not going anywhere to anyone else other than Sam at this point. I think he's cemented it. He was very, very good against Qatar. A little unfortunate in the Uruguay game to slip, obviously, on the second goal and let Suarez in. But you just see the way in which he's able to stay on the same page and at the same pace as Davies and Eustachio and David combining down that left-hand side. I thought I was really impressed with the way he played it, particularly in possession and going forwards against Uruguay. I think he's showing himself to be a real core part of this group now.
Mm-hmm. Josh, final word goes to you. If anyone else just kind of caught your eye, or whether they rose in stock or solidified a position.
Well, I mean, I don't know if his stock can get any higher, but like Stefan Eustachio, to me, solidified his spot as probably the most important player for Canada going into the World Cup. And we know that Alphonso Davies is the most talented player on this team. But watching the confidence that Stefan Eustachio played with, and looking at the fact that there could be a world in which Atiba Hutchinson is not ready for that first World Cup game. And I don't think any of us want that to happen. But if that ends up being the case, I think if you're John Herdman, you have to feel good at just how much Stefan Eustachio is able to elevate his game in a short amount of time. You see it offensively, you see it defensively. And this is a team that, if they're going to have success, they have to be effective in transition. And you need that player sort of right in front of the defenders to begin that transition. And I just thought Stefan Eustachio looked so solid. And to me, there's a very small list of players that I think we can expect to play 270 minutes guaranteed at the World Cup coming up. And for me, Eustachio's on that list.
Josh, I still got to – Alphonso Davies is the most important player on this team. Like, because he bridges the gap between this team, being competitive, to this team potentially going on and springing an upset. Like, he's an X factor just every time he's on the ball. So Alphonso Davies has to be the most important player for this Canada side. I understand what you're saying, positionally speaking, but we saw it in that game against Uruguay. If Davies made the right decision, was a little bit more clinical, a little bit more tidy, Canada could have gone on, scored a goal, maybe come away with the result in that game. I think Davies is absolutely critical.
I think it's
the position he plays.
At this point, like, I get it. Davies is obviously the best player on the team, but in terms of importance, I think it's a wash. Like, I think you take either one of them out and you can wait back to any chance of being out the right. They can't do it without Eustachio, just as much as I don't think they can do it without Davies either.
Josh, before we let you go, I know we've been picking your brain, and rightfully so, because you've been following this team quite closely and know a lot about them, but you've also just been following Canada soccer's journey, even from a fan base point of view. And we know that the largest fan base, known as the Voyagers, is a book that you've also written. It's titled just that. Can you give us the premise of the book and when people can get their hands on it?
Yeah, the book is available for now, and thanks for giving me a chance to speak about it. The book is available now, and it's available anywhere you buy books. I always tell people, though, to give your local bookstore a call downtown and see if they've got it there in stock. But look, the book starts in 1986 in Canada's first journey to the World Cup, and it tracks the highs and lows and everything that, people behind the scenes had to do to get this men's national team back to where they are now, right? And I think that was important for me in trying to tell the story of this men's national team, is not so much the events and the kind of salacious behind the scenes stories that I know people want to read, but also profiling the people that made positive changes. And I looked at Ralph Honigstein's Das Reboot, fantastic book. And one of my favorite soccer books is as a blueprint. And I don't think I got close to it, but I do think that I tried to tell some of the stories of this men's national team in a way that they've never been told before. And my hope is that for any new fan or any diehard fan looking to learn a little bit about this men's national team heading into the World Cup, they'll find something there that they enjoy in the book.
Well, look forward to it. And you know what? Yeah, I mean, a lot of people I know appreciate, obviously, what this national team is doing, but it really hammers home, the history as well, kind of where they've been, what they've done when, and why there's a torch being carried now. So congratulations on writing that. Congratulations on it being published. And we look forward to getting our hands on it. And we appreciate you taking the time here on the show today, Josh.
Thank you. Anytime, guys. Love it.
Thanks, Josh. Good to see you.
There's the book. Joshua Cloak, writer of The Voyagers, also writes for The Athletic, covers the national teams, covers soccer in general in this country. So always great having him on and picking his brain and getting his thoughts on this team as they are getting set to go to the World Cup.